Hello, and welcome back to the COVID Long Haulers podcast, where we share real stories from people living with long COVID, what they faced, how they're coping, and surviving. My name is Emerson, and I'm joined today by our guest, Mo. Some of you might already know Mo as the person behind the Slowcial Life, which was formerly also known as the Chronic Craft Club. They are a long hauler from the UK, here to talk about their experiences living with long COVID for a couple of years now. Hi, Mo. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's so lovely to have you here. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Mo. I'm 30. I live in London in the UK, and I have long COVID and a couple other co-occurring illnesses. So I've got the ME CFS type. I'm treated for MCAS, and yeah.
And do you want to tell us what your life looked like before you developed long COVID?
Before I developed long COVID, I was very, very active, not just physically, but socially and work-wise. I'm a child of the gig economy, so I always had 1,000 different jobs. I worked a lot. I worked in creative sectors and theaters and galleries, and I also, this is going to sound so cringy, but lived a lot, I guess. I filled a lot into my days. I was very sociable. I lived in a flat with three of my good friends who I'd known for a long time. I would walk to work every day, which took about an hour and a half there and back. And then most of my day at work, I'd be on my feet, chatting to people, socializing, often in quite loud spaces. Yeah, and I might also be at the gym, going
Wow.
out in the evenings, that kind of thing. So it looked very different to how it looks now.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. And then you got COVID in 2022 that then
I did.
subsequently turned into long
Long
COVID.
COVID,
Could you
yeah.
tell us about the acute infection and then the beginning of long COVID?
Yeah. The acute infection, honestly, is not memorable at all. I know it happened because I have pictures on my phone of positive COVID tests.
Okay.
And I remember that, so at the time I was, as I mentioned, living with my flatmates, and my parents live really nearby. And in my flat, it's small. We shared a bathroom and that kind of thing. And my parents' house, there's a second bathroom. So I went back there to isolate, went back to my parents' house to isolate because I thought there was less risk of passing it on. So I remember being in this room actually for about a week. And I remember trying not to pass it on. I'd had COVID before, quite a few times actually. I remember telling my doctors at the start of all of this that I seemed just susceptible to COVID infections. I took lots of precautions, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. I got all my vaccines early because I worked for the healthcare system in the UK at the time. But yeah, I just seemed susceptible to it. But none of my infections were ever serious. They were always very mild. And particularly that last one is really not memorable at all. I guess the other thing I remember doing is painting a leather bag. I was doing stuff in my room.
Okay.
I was fine.
So you just had some mild symptoms of fever, and then really you were inactive mostly just to protect the people around you and not to spread infection.
Exactly. But if it wasn't for that, I could have been doing stuff. It really wasn't a big deal. And then you asked about what have I
Yeah.
followed that.
Yeah.
So I recovered, started testing negative, went back to work, got tonsillitis immediately after my COVID infection, which I remember thinking was odd because when I was a child, my sister had tonsillitis twice a year and I'd
Wow.
never had it before. So I was like, oh, that's weird. But that seemed to be something in the past that just wasn't affecting me. And now I've got it. And also, I feel like who gets tonsillitis as an adult? It's not a common thing to get as an
Yeah.
adult, right? So I thought that was weird, but whatever. It was Christmas. And then in January, I got what I thought was a norovirus. I actually think now it was probably my first episode of post-exertional malaise or PEM. But my family had norovirus. My sister has a young son, he's at nursery. It's not uncommon for him to pick up things. And because my parents look after him regularly, it runs around the family pretty quickly. But it was my 10,000th days alive, and I was throwing a party. And
Wow. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
so I think I would have been about 27. I think it's only seven and a bit is your 10,000 days. So I was like, I want to have a party. I'm turning 10,000 days old. And I didn't have any symptoms at all. And I hadn't seen my family in a week. So I was like, I'm going to go ahead with this party. I feel completely fine. And I had the day off work and spent all day cooking, was really excited, got ready. The party would start at 7 p.m. And on the dot at 7 p.m., I suddenly felt absolutely horrific, so unwell. And then I was freaking out because I was like, if I do have norovirus, I've just cooked all these people food, is this going to be a super spreader event kind of thing? But no one else was sick after the party. But I remember I couldn't talk to anyone at the party. I just couldn't hold a
Mhm.
conversation. More and more people kept coming, and I just couldn't do it. And in the end, I went to bed. I must have been like 9 p.m. I was like, I'm gonna have to go to bed. And my friend got everyone to leave. But because I lived in a flat with my friends, we had like mutual friends who would come to the party, but also were friends with my flatmates. So they hung around in the kitchen. And even just knowing that there was like a few people around, it was too much, which now I think really, as I'm describing it, is like that sounds like that kind of ME sensory overwhelm or
Mhm.
PEM or something. But at the time, I was just like, I don't know what's happening to me. So my friend had to go and say, look, I know that you're not here for Mo, but you do actually have to leave anyway because she can't handle you being even in the same
Oh, God.
flat. And it was really weird. And then for the next few months, I had colds often, just kept getting things. Didn't really know why. It wasn't really a big deal. Eventually, I woke up one day with, I guess, a kind of rash. And within the next few days, it spread to my entire body. My skin and my muscles were like so inflamed, so like couldn't really fit my clothes. That's how much bigger I got over like a
Wow.
day or two. I was so swollen. And I went to the doctor, they told me to take antihistamines.
Typical doctor.
Yeah. And nothing really changed. And that lasted for about a month. And during that period, I was able to do less and less. So at the start of it, it was like super uncomfortable. But I remember like going to work and then going for a drink after work. I was fine. I could do stuff. By the end of that month, I couldn't do anything. And I remember saying to my manager that if I was in bed doing absolutely nothing, I felt okay. But as soon as I picked up my laptop or tried to do a thing, my brain stopped working. And I worked in mental health services. So understandably, she was like, it sounds like you're depressed. And I remember saying, I know that it sounds like I'm depressed. I really appreciate that, but I'm not. And I don't know how to convince you that I'm not. My doctors thought I was depressed. They thought I was
Mhm.
depressed and had allergies. And
Yeah.
everyone was just like, oh, you're having a hard time. So in the end, I took 2 weeks off work. And because I literally couldn't get myself out of bed. I couldn't make myself a meal. I couldn't do anything. I booked the cheapest all-inclusive I could find, which was like 2.5 days in Spain. Literally because I was like, I need to not think. I can't get myself breakfast in the morning. I need a few days of not thinking. And bizarrely, I came back completely cured, as I thought. I thought anyway,
Wow.
or at
Did you
least in
do
full remission.
Wow. Did you do anything special in Spain in that short vacation, if you want to call it that?
So I'm dyslexic, so I'm bad. I'm not great at languages anyway. And if you know anything about the English education system, you'll know that we're really bad at languages. So I was finding talking difficult. So talking in another language was like really hard.
Yeah.
I didn't leave the hotel. All the staff spoke English. I spoke to as few people as possible. I got a massage by one of the hotel staff, which was incredible. And I've got on my phone about 200 pictures of me immediately after my massage because I walked back to my room and I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh, I'm fine now. It was really weird. I took so many pictures. I sent them to my mom and she was like, oh, you're fine now. And I was like, I'm fine now. And the massage therapist didn't speak any English. And I remember trying, like, finding her in the hotel afterwards and being like, please tell me what you did. But we just weren't able to understand
Yeah.
each other. But yeah, I had this massage and then I was like completely fine. Really
Wow.
weird, but there you go. And then I was fine for about 8 months. And when I say fine, back to working really long hours, walking to work every day, going out after work, doing loads. And then for some reason that I don't know, I didn't get another infection, didn't have a particularly big thing happen, but I got ill again. Like all the same symptoms came back and I haven't recovered since.
Oh my gosh. That must have been so difficult to have that period of remission and then just have that all be taken away from you again for no apparent reason either, just out of the blue.
Yeah, it wasn't fun, but also
Yeah,
the alternative is to not have the period of remission, right?
true. Yeah.
And at least now I know that not that I have had that again, but if I had that again, I wouldn't I would still be careful. Whereas before I was just like, woo, I can do
Yeah,
anything. So yeah,
probably this is a complete tangent, but I'd have completely different focus on everything.
I feel exactly the same. Yeah. If
Yeah.
like I woke up tomorrow and I was recovered, then yeah, my life wouldn't look like it did 4 years ago. Um,
Yeah.
but in that time, there's like, I think it was a mix. I think I was working in hospitality and the arts, and it was over winter, so it was Christmas, it was our busiest time. So there's like pressure to be like on.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
also, I was so relieved that I
Of
was fine
course,
again.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I had no idea, no one had mentioned long COVID. I certainly hadn't connected those dots. I knew about ME, but I didn't know a lot about ME. I didn't know about PEM, anything like that. So I wasn't conscious of that being a possibility at that time. So yeah, I don't know. It didn't happen when I was really overexerting. It happened when I was quite chilled out.
Okay.
I don't know
So
why, but there you go.
it seems super random, yeah, the mysteries
Yeah.
of the body.
Yeah.
But have you been able to access good medical care, get access to treatments and support, doctors that understand long COVID and ME and all these things?
Like the short answer is no. I think in comparison to other illnesses, definitely not. I've had friends who have had difficult health stuff going on in the last few years, and their quality of care on the NHS has been like almost devastating for me to watch because it's so much what I'm lacking. However,
Yeah.
I think that living in the UK with a chronic illness is still like a huge privilege. And I'm white, I'm articulate, I'm able to accurately describe my symptoms, all of these kind of things make a difference. So
Yeah.
I probably have much, much better healthcare than most people in my situation. But no, it hasn't been good. Certainly, I haven't spoken to anyone who really gets ME at all or long COVID. Even when I've spoken to long COVID specialists,
Yeah.
they don't seem to know what PEM is. Yeah.
Yeah. Seems to be the same kind of all around is that these quote unquote long COVID specialists who don't really seem to understand the complexities of long COVID and the
Yeah.
different subtypes and also the different comorbidities or the infection associated chronic conditions like POTS,
Mm,
ME, MCAS, all of these are all
yeah.
intertwined with long COVID. And you, at least in my experience, I'm always the one explaining, I think I have MCAS. Can you
Yeah.
do this
Yeah.
testing? And
Same.
then it's just up to how can you persuade this doctor to do this
Mm.
testing, to prescribe this medication?
Yeah, completely. And I remember having a conversation with my therapist a few months ago where I was just so frustrated by this. And I remember saying that I play this dance, this ridiculous dance with doctors, where I don't say, I think I've got MCAS, even though it's incredibly obvious that I've got
Yeah.
MCAS. But I say, oh, I'm dealing with this symptom and this symptom. I'm like putting it together for them. And after many, many months, they'll be like, oh, have we considered? And I'll be like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Because if I just say, oh, I think I've got MCAS, they'll be like, okay, a little miss anxious over here. And
Yeah.
I was just like, this is so ridiculous that I play this game because of their ego and fragility, basically, that I can't just say, I appreciate that you're the expert, but I have done a lot of reading. And that doesn't make me a doctor, but I do know my body and I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
Even when I first had that rash, so I've had eczema since I was a baby. When I first got that rash, they just said, you've got eczema and you're depressed. And I was like, I'm not depressed. I actually work in mental health services. So I probably understand more about mental health than my GP, right? Because I was a clinician, I was a therapist. And then I was like, the eczema, okay, I'm not a dermatologist, but I was like, I've dealt with eczema for, at that point, 26 years. This is completely different from anything I've ever experienced. Even when I eventually got to the allergy specialist, I actually cried in the office because she refused to look at the pictures I brought. So I got there and she was like, I've seen you've got eczema on your notes. Case closed. We're not going to do any testing. You've got eczema. And I just like, burst into tears. It wasn't even deliberate, but I was like, you don't understand what I've been through to get here. Can you please just look at my photos? And the only reason she did this because I was crying. And then she gave me some tests and obviously they all came back fine. But I did eventually get to an MCAS clinic, but it was such a convoluted way. I was already under a severe eczema clinic even though I'd been under them for a year, knowing that I didn't have severe eczema. And I managed to get under them, waited for a year until eventually I was like, I'm doing all your treatments, I'm still getting this. Have we considered? And it's like, this feels so ridiculous because 2 years ago I knew I had MCAS. that I have to play this game to get myself to the right place. And luckily I know how to play that game.
Playing that game is so difficult. It is
Yeah.
one of the most exhausting and difficult things about the entire process of
Mm.
dealing with this. I know that diagnosing MCAS is really difficult, but conditions like ME, where it's essentially just a diagnostic criteria, and where my symptoms are a 100% overlap of the diagnostic criteria, it doesn't need an expert to just piece
Yeah.
those two things together.
Equally, I found that really frustrating as well. The person who diagnosed me in the end was a physiotherapist. So,
Oh
as far as
my
I'm aware,
gosh.
not someone that had the background
No,
in that. So, it's
wow.
all you're doing is looking at the diagnostic criteria and listening to what I tell you. If anything, if I diagnose myself, it would be one less step, right? Because I'm already
Yeah,
experiencing it. But yeah, it's
yeah.
a really silly and frustrating system. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned in your introduction that you're getting treated for MCAS. Has that been helping with your symptoms?
I don't know. I think my MCAS, to be honest, I think it's now very mild. So to be clear, I haven't actually been diagnosed with MCAS, but I'm under an
Okay.
MCAS clinic and I take MCAS medication, but they won't
Okay.
diagnose me. Don't know why,
God.
but whatever, it's fine. My experience of the UK healthcare system, which will definitely be different to other people's, is that doctors generally are reluctant to diagnose. I think there's been so much discussion about overdiagnosis that doctors do feel a bit reluctant to diagnose. And also sometimes I can see the benefits in not getting a diagnosis. So a very close friend of mine has all of the same symptoms as me and has done for about 5 years now, directly after a COVID infection. And he decided in the end to not bother trying to get a diagnosis because he was like, they can't do anything for me anyway. And if I have that diagnosis, anytime I go to the doctor, they're going to blame it on long COVID. So I
Yeah.
do think that there can be some benefits
Yeah.
to not being diagnosed because it forces them to consider other options.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, the MCAS medication I'm on is, or I always say it wrong, but it's ketotifen.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think it's pronounced ketotifen, but I'm not
yeah,
sure.
yeah, I don't know. But that one, it really made a difference at first. And I couldn't get it for about 6 months. Don't know what was happening in my pharmacy, just couldn't get it in that time. My symptoms did get worse, but it's more that when I started taking it again, I didn't see the same level as improvement that
Okay.
I expected. I think it's probably partly that I have improved regardless, but I've gone back to taking it now more than anything because my next MCAS appointment is coming up. I at least need to be like, yeah, I'm putting in some effort. I'm taking this pill once a day.
Yeah.
I don't really see the point of going back to them being like, no, I haven't done anything differently and I'm still sick.
Yeah.
So I don't really know if it's helping, but my MCAS symptoms are pretty mild compared to lots of other people in the community. I'm
Okay.
definitely able to eat a lot more now than I used to. So yeah, that is an absolute joy.
That's amazing. I'm so glad for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Are there any other treatment specific things that you would want to talk about that you've tried that you think are interesting or noteworthy?
So this is a more controversial one. I do the Perrin technique, which is an osteopathy technique.
I have never heard of that before.
Yeah. It was created specifically for ME by an
Okay.
osteopath who noticed that a patient that came to him in the 80s who had ME seemed to go into remission after he did like osteopathy. It's pretty controversial, I guess, because like most things, there's not a huge amount of research. Osteopathy generally anyway is debated. I do it because I had that massage and like spontaneously recovered. So for me, it was like it made sense. And because so many of my symptoms, particularly in the beginning of my second phase of being ill, were overwhelmingly neurological. And the theory is basically that your brain stem fluid stops going through your body properly. So it should move from your brain into your liver and be like cleaned, basically. But the argument is that it doesn't, it's not doing that properly in ME. And therefore, manual stimulation, so literally just stroking your body basically, helps to move those fluids around. I've definitely seen a significant improvement while I've been doing it, whether or not it's because I've been doing that or because of something completely random, who knows?
Yeah.
Um, but I think most of us are like clutching at straws. I'm pretty desperate. I don't feel the same desperation to recover that I once did, largely because I'm a lot better than I was. So my quality of life is good. but also obviously I would like to not be sick.
Yeah.
And there are very few options on the NHS. And I guess maybe more importantly, very few people who believe me. And I think one of the most healing things for me anyway has been chatting to a practitioner who believes me when I say this how I feel. And I definitely have had moments over the course of my treatment where I've been to a session and I've instantly felt like some level of improvement and relief. It's not consistent. It's like
Oh,
that every time I go, but it definitely has happened. It costs a lot of money to go to an osteopath. Like
yeah.
it costs however much money your local osteopath costs. But also all of the things that you do can be found on the website. I think it's parentechnique.org or something.
Okay.
But I'm not being paid to advertise them. I
Yeah.
definitely don't feel that it's a magic pill. And I'm not even convinced that it's necessarily the thing that's helping me, but I have improved and I'm reluctant to stop doing what I've been doing for that reason.
Yeah. I totally get that. It's so difficult to know what is helping and what isn't, and you never want to stop the one thing that actually is helping. I just want to add here for our listeners, not to discredit your experience or anyone else's experience with this technique, Mo, that as of now, there is no real clinical evidence that the parent technique is useful or beneficial for people living with ME/CFS or long COVID, but we will have more information available in our show notes. So, besides the ketotifen and the osteopathy, were you able to try anything else to manage your long COVID?
There's
It's
nothing else. I take a lot of antihistamines,
difficult.
but nothing else that the NHS has like, that's not true. They've offered some kind of group courses which have been completely useless.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then the typical things like LDN, LDA, I don't know what else people are talking about out there right now
Yeah.
that has not been offered to you. Not okay.
It's definitely not been offered to me by my standard healthcare professionals. I'm quite keen to try LDN and I will at some point. The only reason I haven't is because I'm like constantly being like, oh, maybe I'll try this supplement. And when I'm like, oh, I should probably give it a few months and like see, because I don't want to try like 10 things at once. So I end up
Mhm.
putting it off, but it's definitely something that I want to do in the next 6 months. It's been on my list for a while. I don't know anyone that's accessed it on the NHS for long COVID or ME, so it has to be accessed privately here. So the more that I can not pay for private healthcare, then the better. I have gone back to therapy. Actually, this week is my last session, and I don't think that's helped with my symptoms. But again, having someone who believes me was massive. And I think that generally chronically ill people are probably accused a lot of talking about their illness all the time or making their illness their whole identity or personality, and having a space where I could be like, yeah, it's what it is.
Yeah.
And also test things out, test out how I think about myself now, how I describe myself now, what I think about, I don't know, different things in the community has been really valuable. And yeah, just having a space where no one's going to be like, oh my God, we've heard this 1,000 times. That has been really helpful.
I
And
can
I've had
imagine.
therapies on the NHS for long COVID, which have been not helpful at all, where I very much get the sense that the person doesn't really think I'm telling the truth.
Yeah, that is not that's not helpful at all when you go to a therapist to talk about your struggles and then they're like, "No, your illness is not real. You're just pretending to be disabled."
Yeah,
Ugh,
yeah,
gosh, yeah.
yeah.
So, just to completely change the subject, you've mentioned you were super active before you developed long COVID. Could
Yeah.
you tell us what your life looks like now that you've been living with this illness?
Yes, it looks very different now to how it looked when I was at my worst. Now, my life looks like I live with my parents. I generally wake up, try not to speak to anyone because I get very overwhelmed very quickly, and that quickly turns into stress in the mornings. I might start crying if the radio's on and my mum asks me a question. So I wake up in the morning, I eat breakfast, and then I generally go back to sleep for at least a couple of hours, or I try to go back to sleep. And when I wake up, I tend to feel a bit more ready for my day. Typically, I would do some work on the Slowcial Life, which is the kind of creative workshops I run for disabled people. I would maybe make some social media content. And in the evening, I possibly maybe once a week would walk my dog. I might make dinner if I haven't walked the dog, again, maybe like once a week. And then in the evening, I will try to stop working because my brain is very active. I notice that if I don't stop by like 6, then I don't get to sleep until like 2. If I stop at 10, it's like game over because it takes my brain a long time to wind down. So I guess that's like standard day.
That evening routine is exactly the same as mine. At 6 p.m., everything has to be quiet. Same
Yeah,
routine every evening.
yeah,
Otherwise, I can't sleep. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
Really
That
have more
is,
flexibility in my routine now than I used to. But yeah, it still has to be, I would say, fairly inflexible compared to a healthy person.
yeah. What has been the hardest adjustment for you?
The lack of spontaneity was initially really hard. I think so. Actually, this is one of the things that I do think I probably have to credit the parent technique for was like there was maybe like about a year period after I got sick again that I completely did not have a personality or an identity. I don't know what to say. I didn't have it anymore. I couldn't, my brain was so slow that I couldn't be more than like a robot. And it was every single thing I did was focused on what I was doing. So if I was like, I need a glass of water, I'm going to take one step and then I'm going to take another step and then I'm going to take another step. So there's no space in that to have an identity or a personality. So that was incredibly painful and like distressing and awful.
Yeah.
And after 4 weeks of my osteopathy sessions, I woke up one day and I didn't have that anymore. I was myself again. And that was like absolutely amazing. I might still be really tired. I might still be thinking like one foot after the other, but I could think ahead. I could think behind. I could think like an adult with a fully developed prefrontal cortex. I could think about consequences,
Yeah.
these things that I just could not have done before. And I don't know how I would have coped if that had continued because it was honestly, that was the worst thing for me. So I would say for me, that was the hardest adjustment at that point in my life where I was like, I'm not myself. And then I guess coming back to that, as you mentioned earlier, when you said if you spontaneously recovered tomorrow, you don't think you go back to how your life was. Then when I did gain some capacity for personhood again, it was like, what does this look like now after having had that experience? So I guess, yeah, I think I've had a lot of stuff with my identity that's felt difficult. And that's something that being in therapy has been really helpful for, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so relatable. So much of what you've spoken about. You are a very creative person, which I find so cool. And you host the Slowcial Life.
Yeah.
What I would like to know is what gave you the idea to start the Slowcial Life? Where did that idea come from?
So before I got sick, I hosted this thing in my flat called Craft Brunch, where like I asked everyone to bring a brunch item, some juice or like some bread or whatever. And I laid out all of the craft materials I had, which was too many. And just like people came over and did stuff. And I was really keen that it wasn't just my friends. Obviously, my friends were invited, but I wanted it to feel like a community thing. But I invited people that I went to school with, but I hadn't spoken to for a really long time. I invited neighbors, I invited people I worked with, and it was really fun. And it got too big for my flat, so I eventually started hosting it in a local kind of community space cafe, which meant that I charged for tickets, and I was charging like a very small amount, maybe like a third of the price of a cup of coffee, but tickets would sell out. And
Wow.
it meant that if you couldn't guarantee whether or not you could come on a certain day, then you wouldn't be able to buy a ticket in advance, and then the tickets would sell out and you wouldn't be able to come, right? And I had myself, my health was getting worse, although I didn't really understand what was happening, but it was getting worse. And I had friends who had mental health difficulties or had caring responsibilities. You wouldn't be able to know until the day of whether or not they'd be able to make a thing. So I figured that if you delivered all of the resources for a specific craft activity to someone's house, and then you had like, a session on Zoom, it wouldn't matter whether they'd be able to make that session because they could do the activity. So if they paid the materials rather than the Zoom session, then whether or not they made the Zoom, obviously it's nice to make the Zoom, but it's not the end of the world
Yeah.
because you still have got the thing that you brought into. Whereas if you buy a ticket to an event and then you can't go to the event, that's it. You don't get anything.
Hmm.
And if I give you a refund, then I lose money and blah, blah, and it's difficult. So then I did that. I did it as a one-off and I posted about it on Instagram and I called it Chronic Craft Club and it exploded. Interestingly, because I didn't know that I had ME or long COVID at the time, it was really shared around in those communities. And people really showed up to support me, which I was incredibly grateful for because I wasn't in those communities. I didn't know those people. Yeah. And also I'd been running in-person events that were like not masked. And I, funnily enough, really prided myself on my access considerations, but I definitely wasn't thinking about infection control. There was no reason for these people to show up and support me, but they really did. And I was like really grateful. Before the end of the year, I did one of those and one more in-person session. And at the last in-person session, I couldn't do it. I showed up, but I couldn't really speak to anyone. I was really overwhelmed. I couldn't carry the resources to and from the place on my own. So I had friends to help me do that. And I realized that I, A, wasn't able to keep doing in-person stuff, and B, there was this community of people who I had offered them a crumb and they had like jumped at it, right? And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
there is so little provision for this community. And then quite quickly afterwards, I was like, oh, I'm in this community. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really, probably if I hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't have realized as quickly what was wrong with me and wouldn't have been able to take precautions to not crash more and that kind of thing. Because
Mhm.
suddenly having been exposed to these people who were like making posts about long COVID or ME or PEM or how to protect yourself helped me, I think, to not get worse. I was taking infection precautions, so I wasn't getting sick over and over again. I was being careful not to crash too much. And I was doing that as a result of suddenly being exposed to this community who'd shown up for me. So I have like, a huge amount to be thankful for the community, not just for their support of my workshops, but also generally, if my health is improved, it's down to them and mainly more severe people who use their energy to like
Yeah.
share with the rest of us how we can reduce the likelihood
Yeah.
that you'll get worse. And it's often, I think, people who are much, much more severe than me who taught me what to do there, because certainly my doctors weren't going to.
Yeah. There's so much good education coming from some of the most severely affected people within our community, and I'm so grateful for all of the awareness and all of the other work
Mhm.
they do. Could you
Yeah.
tell us what your Slowcial Life or Chronic Craft Club sessions usually look like?
Yeah. So then basically I got too ill to run in person stuff. And as I said, I noticed there was a big demand for this idea that I had about sending craft packs. So I did that for a year. I did every other month. I sent a craft pack. That was what I had capacity to do at the time. By the end of that year, I'd started doing more sessions without a craft pack, which I was reluctant to do because you fall back in the same issue of if the event is the session and you can't make
Yeah.
the session, it's difficult. But I found kind of different ways around it. So now all of my sessions come with a PDF document. So probably my most popular session is called Doodle and Chat. Does what it says on the tin. You come, we doodle, we chat. And it comes with like PDF. So when you book your ticket, you get a PDF of all the doodle prompts. It's not perfect, but it does mean that if you can't make the session, you at least have some ability to engage without being in a Zoom. You can still do the doodle prompts, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's kind of other ways behind the scenes that I'm trying to make that more effective. So now I run at least a session a week and there's one craft pack a month. My aim with them is to try to provide opportunity for like spontaneity, which we don't get a lot of, and for joy, for laughter and silliness, because I think that it's so hard to access that when you're sick because
Yeah.
so much of your life and your energy is taken up with survival. You don't have space to do something silly. And I really value silliness personally. I
Yeah.
think it's important.
Me too.
So I try to make them fun and silly. That's the aim, basically. The aim is definitely not making good art, although that often happens. People are super, super creative in the community, but certainly that's not why I do creative things. The aim is to not create incredible artists. The aim is to just like do something silly in, I guess, a low stakes way. So if you book a ticket, you can't join the Zoom, it's not a problem. If you do join the Zoom, but you only stay for 5 minutes, that's fine. If you come, but you stay off camera and you don't say anything, that's also not a problem.
I think it's so lovely that you do this because a lot of the community options that we have are very focused on mindfulness, or it's support groups of talking about your troubles. And these things are all very important. And I don't want to belittle the people who do these things. These are very important things, but just the casual hanging out and talking while doodling, or just, yeah, being spontaneous, having fun, being silly, that is so important. So I really admire that you're doing that and organizing that. So thank you so much for doing that, Mo.
It's a pleasure. It is my life's purpose. I absolutely love it. It just makes it so much better that other people are interested. But I,
Yeah.
it's funny that you talked about meditation because obviously me and you have spoken about that before.
Yeah.
I love meditation, not against meditation. I did it a lot before I got sick. My mum is a meditation teacher, so I'm pro meditation. But I do, like I said before, when I lost my identity and then had to rebuild it, the things that I was being offered that were accessible to me were like boring. Meditation is boring. It's
Yeah.
not, it's meant to be like laugh a minute.
Yeah.
It's meant to be boring. It's meant to be hard to an extent. Every time you think about something else and you think, oh my gosh, I need to come back to my breath or something. It's boring, it's difficult, it's annoying, and we do it anyway in the hope that it's beneficial. And it probably is. But sometimes I want to do something just for a laugh, you know? And I don't get a lot of opportunities to do that. If you think about a kid having fun, they're like running or they're splashing or they're jumping, they're not sitting still. And for most of us, we can't run or splash or jump. And it means we have to think creatively about how we can have fun because it is incredibly easy when you're sick to have a life that revolves purely around the next medical appointment or the next treatment you're going to try
Yeah.
or the next, I don't know what it is, like meditation session or whatever. And to be clear, for a lot of people, they don't have a choice. Having fun is something
Mhm.
you have to be
It's a
well enough to
privilege.
do.
Yeah.
But I also think there is a lot of people in the community who might be well enough, but they don't have the opportunity because the options for having fun is like the club or even like a cafe or a local run club. And none of those things are accessible. So I guess I wanted to provide an opportunity. At least there was something you could do that was fun. If you don't want to, that's fine. But at least the option's there.
Yeah. I love that.
The social life sessions, there's also almost always a free option. So I guess that's the other way that I try to make them as accessible as possible. I hope that it will stay affordable for people like us who might go to the sessions. But in order for that to happen, there does
Mhm.
need some money coming in. So yeah, I ask for donations, but there's almost always a free option. Well, I guess the other thing I want to say is that this is a long-term thing, regardless of whether or not tomorrow they like invent a cure. We've been living this for a long time, and the likelihood is that we'll be living with it for a lot longer. And I personally cannot live a life that doesn't contain at least some lightness some of the time. I need that to give me hope to keep going. And at least my understanding of like meditation and nervous system work and that kind of thing is that fun is like an absolutely vital element. So even people who are promoting spending like a lot of your time on like calming activities, the nervous system also needs silliness. It can't
Yeah.
always be like grounding and calm. It needs lightness as well. So I think they're
Laughing
good,
is
like
really good for the vagus nerve, actually. So,
exactly. No, it
yeah.
massages it literally. Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah, there's so many benefits to fun. And generally as adults, we don't get enough of it. And as chronically ill adults, I think we're really, really limited. Partly because if we're seen to be having fun, that might mean that our symptoms don't exist anymore. So I think being in a space
Yeah.
people get that how you show up today doesn't mean anything about how you'll be tomorrow is important as well.
I love that so much. I'm in awe of what you do for the community, Mo.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, how has organizing and hosting the Slowcial Life been for you health-wise? Is it manageable?
Is it manageable? I think there are people who, probably not wrongly, would tell me that I'm overdoing it. I think they're right. I am overdoing it. But I also think that there has to be balance, right? It's like, for example, that sometimes you'll host a podcast. And if you didn't ever host a podcast, if you only ever stayed in bed, your symptoms might reduce more than if you did podcasting.
Yeah.
But It's hard, firstly, to only ever stay in bed. It's really difficult. Radical rest is an incredibly difficult thing to do.
It's so difficult.
And secondly, when you're living with something long term, you do need something else. You need something else. So sometimes it's difficult, but I think built into the accessibility for participants is also accessibility for me. Like I mentioned that there are like PDF sheets. What that means is that if I show up to a session and I'm like really brain foggy, I don't actually have to facilitate my sessions. With this, I'm like, here are the doodle prompts, you know?
Yeah.
And I guess I facilitate it in the way that I try to remember to like remind people to take breaks. I try to create an environment that feels welcoming. If someone is feeling distressed, then I try to hold space for them and also make sure that other people are okay with that. But I don't have to remember what the next thing I meant to say is because it's on the PDF. So that really helps. And also my sessions aren't particularly long. At most, they're an hour and a half. That's for a chronic craft club session, where the activity is usually doing a craft. After the first 10 minutes, people are getting on with it. So I'm not having to like keep being like, this is the next step, this is the next step. And again, they have the how-to sheet.
Yeah.
This year we got funding from Arts Council England. So I now have
Amazing.
5 staff members.
Wow.
By staff members, I mean like most of us work 2 hours a week. But that, as you can imagine, like massively, massively helps.
Yeah.
So although at the moment I do run the sessions myself, I hope that in the future we'll have more sessions with more people running them. There's
Mhm.
also like I guess like a selfish thing of like, if I'm going to be sick for a long time, I need to be able to find not just like something I'm interested in that I can do while I'm sick, but also like a way of surviving, like a way of making some money, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think if I wasn't doing this, maybe I'd be able to recover quicker if that's even an option. But also doing this helps to protect my future, right? If I can set it up now, then it's something that hopefully I'll be able to do in like 3, 4 years' time, whether or not I'm sick. Obviously, if I got a lot worse, I wouldn't be able to run sessions, but
Yeah.
maybe the structure would be set up so other people could run the sessions.
I think so many people are so quick to judge of like, oh, you just have to rest more and you have to do all these things. And I guess it's very easy for abled people to say who aren't living in these bodies, but we don't have any certainty that laying in bed 24/7 without any sensory input will actually maintain our baseline or make us improve. And especially if we're suffering now. I do think resting and pacing is important. I'm never going to go around telling people to run marathons, but yeah, I do think that we do have to find ways to find joy and fun
Mhm.
however we can whilst living with these severely disabling conditions.
Yeah, completely. And I think on top of that, firstly, have you tried resting in bed with no sensory stimulation? It's incredibly difficult. Plus, on top of that, you have the kind of societal pressure that a lot of people will tell you that is bad for you.
Yeah.
So even if you highly suspect that is going to help you long term, it's very difficult. I personally have found it very difficult to do that because I worry that it makes me look like I don't want to get better. So, for example, I was recommended last year graded exercise therapy on the
Oh
NHS.
gosh.
And I knew the dangers of graded exercise therapy and I didn't want to do it. And for example, my osteopath was like, I think that's a really bad idea. My family were like, I think that's a really bad idea. Thankfully, my family is supportive and have good understanding of the kind of conditions that I live with. But I was also like, if I don't do it, and my friends find out that I didn't do the treatment that's being offered, my friends who, on the most part, thankfully, have their experience with the NHS is that doctors believe them and that they treat their conditions and that they get better. How do I explain that? How do I explain to a doctor who sees my notes that I've refused to engage with the only ME treatment being offered to me? So I did the first few sessions and then I stopped because it was ridiculous. But
Yeah.
not only is breastfeeding incredibly difficult, but it's also you have to have a lot of mental strength, I think, to turn these things down. Because at least for me, my worry is that everyone will be like, oh, you just like being sick because you're not even trying that. There's so many reasons why it's difficult to rest, and lying there doing nothing, even in isolation of all the societal pressures, is incredibly difficult. And you have to have the care and the people
Right.
standing, and you have to, your doorbell can't ring, and like all of those kind of things.
It's so difficult. Yeah. I'm really lucky. I live with my parents as well. and they take care of me, and that gives me the space and the capacity for my life not to be focused only on survival, where I
Yeah.
have to do the household work and take care of myself and go do grocery shopping. My family does all of that. That's why
Mhm.
I'm able to knit and talk to you, do this podcast. And I'm fully aware that there are a lot of people out there who are maybe much sicker than I am with much less support than I have, who for them joining an event or creativity is completely out of their reach because
Yeah.
it's not something they can access under these conditions. So it's
Yeah.
incredibly heartbreaking and frustrating to think about and know that we're just all being harmed and neglected in one way or another.
Yeah, yeah, completely. And it's the same for me. I live with my parents and they do everything. And if they didn't, then I'd have significantly less capacity to do things for joy.
Mo, what do you think you've learned about being human through all of this?
I think it's such a good question.
Thank you.
It's a really beautiful question. I think before I got sick, I had like theoretical knowledge that we can't control things. Since I got sick, I've got a really practical and bodily understanding of that, that we can't really control what's going to happen tomorrow. And what we can, I guess, control is like what we do with what we've got. And again, lots of people can't, depending on how sick you are. You might actually not be able to, but at least for me, with all of the privileges that I have, I can often control, you know, how much time I spend thinking about how depressing it is that we're treated this way. And it's important to think about that, but I can also be like, okay, maybe I should stop thinking about that now. So I think it's really taught me something about control. And I guess it's also reminded me, I think, of how human knowledge is fallible. I think a lot of my work when I was working was in access and disability access. And it is both very shameful to me and also quite shocking, I think, that I did all this work in access and I considered myself a disability advocate. I'm neurodivergent. I had that as well. But even before I was diagnosed, I did a lot of stuff in disability access in the arts. And I just didn't know about I knew about long COVID as an arbitrary kind of thing that happened to some people, but I thought it was like maybe you have a cough for a few extra months. Like I really I definitely wasn't thinking about infection control. So I guess it's taught me a lot about humility and the importance of that. And also I think the capacity that humans have for care. Because as I said, the community really I was not someone that was doing anything for them. And I showed up for this one thing. I was like, hey, do you want to pay for this thing? And everyone was like, yeah, we'd love to do that. Thank you. And yeah, that's been really incredible. I guess about resilience as well. I was thinking one of the questions that was written down was about how my social life has changed. I was thinking for the session that it is really different, but it's not worse. It's not a social life that I ever imagined having. But I'm on like Discord groups that I check in with every day, and I play D&D on a Monday night on Zoom with other people with long COVID. I'm on my phone all the time, and lots of people will be like, "Oh my God, your screen time is awful." But I'm like, I'm chatting to people nonstop. So yeah, I think the community has shown me a real capacity for love and care, and I'm incredibly grateful for that.
That's such a lovely answer. The community is a godsend, honestly. It's amazing what we do with the little that we have.
Yeah.
What do you want listeners to take away from this conversation?
There's a thousand things I could say, right? I could say like, oh, the importance of like creativity or rediscovering yourself through sickness or whatever. But I think I've been able to do that largely because of luck. I would never want someone who was like bedbound to hear me be like, "Have you just had a bit more fun?" Life would be really easy because
Yeah.
it's not that.
Amen. Yeah.
Man, I guess I don't feel confident enough that any of the knowledge or like anything that have said or have to say is like universal enough for people to take one thing away from it. I think maybe the capacity the community has for love and care and forgiveness and also for like creativity. And I think also potentially maybe the possibility that there might in the future be space for silliness or joy in your life, regardless of how like sick you are now. And also for some people, there might be space for that right now. But I think that probably that's something that we like have to believe, because if we think that will never come back to us, then it's just too sad, right? I think maybe saying about the capacity for joy is always like possible, right? I think one of the things I say a lot is that change is inevitable. And that can be scary, but it's also, particularly for those of us who are like in the depths of illness, can be quite reassuring, I think.
I love that. Thank you so much, Mo.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to chat to you.
I really enjoyed our conversation. This month, Mo and I would like to highlight Nafas's fundraiser. Nafas is a queer disabled illustrator and poet of color who is struggling with severe ME, long COVID, and other comorbidities. They are currently surviving in Berlin and are completely bedbound, relying on personal assistance to take care of them. Due to the neglect of the German government and being rejected from state benefits, they have been left without adequate support. And this has caused them great amounts of stress and has directly contributed to their deterioration. Nafas's care is currently being paid for by this community's donations, so please check out their Ko-fi and Etsy where you can buy their art or subscribe to a membership. You can find the links in our show notes. And before we close out today's episode, we do want to say a quick thank you to everyone who has filled out our survey on loneliness and isolation. We've been reading through your responses and we really appreciate you taking the time to share them with us. And we know it has been a while since that survey closed, but I do want you to know that we are currently working on the episode. We don't have a release date for it just yet, as our team is going through a really difficult period right now. But please know that it is coming. We have not forgotten about it, and we are doing our best to get it right. So thank you so much for bearing with us. As always, while our discussions offer medical-related insights, this is not medical advice. Always consult your healthcare team with any of your medical concerns. If you would like to connect with our community, you will find a link to our Discord server in the show notes, along with our Substack and socials. We aim to release episodes monthly, so please subscribe and stay tuned for future episodes. Until next time, this is the COVID Long Haulers podcast signing off. See you on the next one.